Sorry. All right, let's start the episode.
Okay,
Karen, please introduce our amazing guest.
Karen.
Karen.
Karen, please introduce
Oh my God. Look what you've done.
Well, hello everyone, I'm Karen.
Nice. You just run it. What do you just said? Ask yourself the questions.
Oh,
Well, after you just said it was going to be a snooze fest, I was like... I'm so looking forward to sharing my story.
Karen, welcome to the Chip Lunch Podcast.
Thank you.
It's really lovely to have you on. What's your... I always get your title wrong
I
at
don't
church.
know. Training pastor, let's go with that.
Training pastor, teaching pastor, they're both related.
Yeah,
Welcome.
thank you.
It's lovely to have you on. Braden, why don't you ask the first question of Karen now that we've finally introduced her properly?
It's funny, we've only got 2 or 3 questions. I'm trying to remember which one's the first one. You'd think I would have figured it out by now.
It's Chip Lunch.
Karen,
Chip Lunch.
how do you like your hot chips?
Well, if I'm sort of looking for a bit of a dirty treat, I'd have to just go, chips with chicken salt.
Oh,
But
Yes.
if I want something a bit fancier,
Love
I'd
it.
probably go chips with aioli,
ooh.
or maybe even garlic aioli.
Put some sweet garlic in that aioli. I always like to ask people, is there a special type of aioli that you like to use? You're like, that's the one I want to use? Or is there a
No,
special
not really.
location you like to
Not
get
really,
your
but
chips from?
actually, in recent times, I've been getting into the Kewpie mayo. So
Oh.
I haven't
Yes.
actually recently had a hot chip. I'd probably go Kewpie mayo.
Yeah.
Really? What is the difference between a usual mayonnaise or the original mayonnaise and Kewpie mayonnaise?
I can't remember what it is. They either just use the whites or they just use the yolks of the egg. I can't remember which one.
Okay.
Whatever, it's delicious.
Yeah, it is.
Is
good.
it?
Yeah.
I don't think I've actually ever had it, to be perfectly honest with
Oh
you.
yeah,
Yes.
it's very good.
That's right. We'll make this podcast about me again. The next question, Karen, I'm just going to look up the difference between Kewpie
Okay.
and mayonnaise.
The
Is,
important questions.
while I ask you that question, the most important question on this podcast, though, is how did you become a Christian?
Cool. It was a process, I think, like as probably many people experience. But I was sort of in high school, mid-high school, early to mid-high school.
So like year 9 or year 10?
Yeah, sort of year 9, I reckon. And I think I was always, a good girl, did the right, what I considered to be what people expected of me, did the right thing. And I was sort of getting to that age where some of my friends were, going to pubs, and it's like, I don't want to be doing that because I'm not supposed to. I'm not allowed to do that. I'm not old enough to do that. So I think that was part of it. I was looking for an alternative to, lifestyle that I didn't really want to explore.
Yeah.
I was also really interested, and I was like in the school musical productions, and so I also like loved singing.
Yeah.
And some friends of mine who were part of a church were in a musical at church, and they were like, well, you can come and be in this musical, but you have to sort of come to church to be in the musical. I'm like, okay.
Gotcha.
So I went along to probably really more because of the musical. So I started to go along to Go Baps, and was in this musical. They were welcoming me in, even though I wasn't a Christian at that point. And so I think it was through that introduction to a different community, an alternative community that was doing things that I felt were much more appealing than going to pubs and clubs and just doing stuff that was not what I felt like was a good thing for me to be doing.
Yeah.
But I think what actually, for me, what was significant in that journey, that decision to actually finally become a Christian was one of my friends and her relationship with her dad, and just watching that and go, wow, that's actually really quite different to what I experienced. And that being really appealing. And he was a Christian, obviously Christian father, modelling a relationship that I hadn't really seen. And so that was something that was actually really appealing to me as well. This is different. There's this sort of family belonging that was different to what I had felt in my family. And that was what sort of opened me up to just checking out what does the Bible say. And I do remember, praying the prayer so many times in the service. It's like, just not being really sure. Should I pray it again? You know, so to pinpoint an actual day is probably hard, but that process of being opened up to this God in the Bible who was called Father, who and then I had this other image of a Christian father that I was looking at, going, wow, that's pretty special, that relationship that he has with his daughter.
Do you remember what was strikingly special about that relationship? Do you remember anything specific that jumped out, or was it just generally the way they communicated?
Yeah, I think it was just the more nurturing, connected relationship that it was. I mean, I was close to my dad, and Dad was a fun dad. He would always be out there. Well, Dad was a fun, competitive dad. So, if we were out there skipping with a skipping rope, he would come out and show us how to do it, and be able to do it more and faster.
You're doing it all wrong, guys. Let me show you.
Let me show you.
Yeah.
But there wasn't the spiritual part that was, and I don't know that I would have been able to describe what I thought was missing, but I saw something different in that relationship with. Between my friend and her dad, that was like, oh wow, that's a special thing. And then hearing about the love of God, then as I went to church, sort of connecting those two things together and going, oh, that's an interesting and appealing thing that I feel like is missing.
What was the musical, by the way?
It was called It's Getting Late. I was in a few after that, in Joseph and his multicoloured coat and those probably others. But I do really distinctly remember this one. It's called It's Getting Late, and we had to do this particular song where we had to pretend that we were typing, and the song was about it's getting late.
Would you describe yourself as a punctual person? Is that what it really drew you to the theatre?
Had nothing to do with punctuality though. just purely about singing.
Oh right.
Yeah. No.
Do you like to be late or do you like to be early, Karen?
I like to be on time because I feel like it's disrespectful to the other person if I'm late.
Yeah. Page straight out of my book too. I like that. Yep. Yeah. I agree. Some other people agree with me. Disagree with me. There's someone at work who's like, I just didn't grow up like that, so I don't care. Yeah. Like, all right then. Fine. You also mentioned one of the things that really drew you to God was the relationship you saw with that your friend had with her father.
Her dad, yeah.
But then there's also, you talked about belonging.
Yeah.
And that was something that we actually talked to Grace about last episode, was that she really felt like becoming a Christian had helped her with really helping with a sense of belonging. Yeah. I'm just wondering, why do you think you felt that way as well? Yeah,
I think, I guess as far back as I can remember, I think I always knew that at some point my mum and dad wouldn't stay together. So I don't know that I feel like as I reflect on how it affected me and my brother and sister, that I actually came through it pretty unscathed in lots of ways. And as I look back on it,
you're the oldest? Okay.
As I look back on it, I think, God's hand was on me through all of that before I was aware of that. But I think it was that sense of, this is not very stable. And so, whereas the relationship that I saw with my friend and her dad felt solid and stable. The sort of, relationship that you read about in the Bible between, Father and, between God the Father and his people, solid, not unstable. So probably it was that. And belonging, I guess, is tied to that, because if it's unstable, it could shatter. So, yeah.
Well, that was similar to Grace, that she felt that a certain instability in her life, which is mainly came from having to move to lots of different places and having to establish herself in a new country, and those kind of things added to that too. So I can understand how that sense of belonging comes from two different ways, like your own story and her story, but I can understand why that unshakable foundation is really, really key to you knowing Jesus.
Yeah. I think another big part of the whole sort of Christian journey and learning what it means to be part of God's family also centres around the whole idea of self-sufficiency as well. Because I do remember as a kid and, hearing arguments and things in the house, having this thing that I used to go, if I've got 20 cents, then I know I can make a phone call to someone if I need to, and I'll be able to sort out something. And so I think that bred a real sense of sufficiency on myself. which I think did serve me okay, well in trying to navigate some of the instability. But it wasn't helpful going into the Christian life with looking at what does it look like now to let go of some of that self-sufficiency and to trust now this Father that I actually can trust.
That self-sufficiency serves you to a point.
Yeah, to a point, yeah.
But then if God's revealing that to you, then you need to, now it's the time to rely on me.
Yeah.
It was year 9 or year 10 that you said that you really made...
Yeah, that sort of time, yeah.
So you just mentioned the self-sufficient. Was there anything else that you think really changed once you made the choice to become a Christian and answered that call that God was making to you for quite a while?
Well, I guess, the things that I involved myself in changed. So I was less... I did still occasionally, go with my school friends to bars and pubs, but it was not wherever there was an alternative church, I would do that. Friendships changed a bit. The people who I ended up being, more longer term school friends, changed a bit. Those who were more connected with church became the people that I was more connected with at school as well. So that sort of changed. I think that sense of who you are in the world and that stability thing is probably what changed. I think I was, as I said, I was a fairly good girl, so there wasn't major behaviours that I feel like I had to change, but it was more that self-sufficiency thing that's been and has continued to be something that I need to continually work on and think about what does it mean to actually sacrifice myself and not be too in control of everything. Yeah.
Can you think of a specific example where you would have previously relied on yourself but then realised, no, actually in this instance I am actually going to rely on God?
Not really a specific thing, but I think in terms of decisions and, as at that end of school you're then moving into uni and work and, there were lots of occasions of thinking through, well, what's the next step in my life? So I went to uni and studied psychology and got involved in the campus Bible study stuff at uni, and really involved in church and leadership and stuff at church at the same time. So I was that sort of career decision versus ministry decision. I guess that would have been one of the things where I was trying to be less in control of that decision and trying to be more open to what does God want. Where would God want me to be serving Him? And I think, I was feeling like that was going to be ministry, but it sort of didn't happen that way as in those earlier sort of parts of my working life. Mm-hmm. Partly because, I met Anthony, he went into ministry, and I felt like, okay, that's not going to be, we're both not going to go into ministry. Someone has to earn some money. But again, in hindsight, that maybe that was me taking more control of the decision than I needed to, because I certainly learned over the years. So I sort of reframed, my role is going to be a provider here, and Anthony's going to be in ministry, and that's cool. But it was interesting that I learned, God really taught me that you don't have to be the provider. I'm the provider, you just need to be faithful. And so I think I started to let go of the control a little bit and just look at, well, what does it look like to be faithful to the work that's in front of me. And then eventually now being able to actually be working in ministry is, I think, a really lovely blessing of God that, He finally got me there.
Yeah. So he really did, and we're really thankful for your commitment and effort that you put in for here at church. So thank you for that. You mentioned Anthony, your husband. Mm-hmm. Tell us about how you guys met, because it was at school. Is that correct? It was at school.
It was at school, and we weren't in the same groups of friends at school. I was in the more academic, more highly regarded by the teachers group at school. And Anthony was in the group that was not quite that.
Oh, come on.
There was one very famous incident that gets talked about a lot where, I was also, prefect and as you'd expect, someone who's a good girl. The principal got Anthony into his office one day and pushed him up against the lockers and said, "What are you doing with Karen Alt class? Leave her alone."
Wow.
So, and my dad wasn't so in favour of it either. But
he's a real bad boy, was he?
He was a bit of a bad boy. But he can tell his own story one day.
I would love to get him on the podcast. We need to do that.
He will in the future, I'm sure.
Yeah. So we sort of really, even though we were at school together, I didn't really, because we weren't in the same circle of friends, we weren't really friends at school, but it was through church. He was at Gymea Baptist as well, and so through youth group and just getting to know him in that context was where that started.
How long have you been married now?
Don't you ask me that before I have to work it out. We got married in 89, so we have whatever that works out to be.
Yeah. What are you looking at me for?
I know that I'm not figuring out the numbers, bro.
All right, let's get the calculator.
We'd been together for about 7 years before that.
Right.
So
hang on.
Yeah, we've been together for longer than we haven't.
It's 2022 minus 1989. 33 years.
There you go.
Plus another 7.
So that's
40 together.
40 years, wow.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
You're not that.
I'm not, I'm only 41, so yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You got together very early.
We did.
School.
We did.
That's primary school.
We did. Yes. So was there a question in that?
Not really. I'm happy for you to dish as much dirt as you want on Anthony. But,
no.
It's fascinating that the teacher was that passionate about
he was
defending your honour.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But no, he didn't see the potential that I saw.
I like that. I like that way you worded it. So, moving out of high school, you're saying that you decided to do psychology. What was the thinking behind that?
Oh, just
pardon the pun.
That was the thinking behind psychology. I just always wanted to do something with people, help people, understand people, and I don't know, maybe I don't know whether any of my sort of family life experience had helped with that, but well, there's a bigger story, I guess, with that. I actually thought that I wanted to do medicine. And that was what I was heading for. But at the time, Mum and Dad's marriage was splitting up, and Mum was really passionate about medicine too, and she went and did naturopathy. And then I was really like, is this Mum's sort of wish for me, or is this my interest? And so I didn't do it. I actually think I would have liked being a doctor, but in hindsight now. But
I think you would have an excellent bedside manner.
Yeah, but no, I did psychology instead. So. And which I really enjoyed, but I think I quickly worked out as I was at uni that counselling wasn't really the thing that I was interested in doing. So I sort of did more organisational psychology and ended up working in that sort of area, HR and organisational psych. So
what uni did you go to?
New South.
Okay.
Yeah.
They've had a lot of New South people on here. And you mentioned the campus Bible study was a big part of your life. We've spoken before, I actually said this on Grace's episode too, that we didn't spend much time at university. We were happy to get out of there as soon as possible and weren't really part of the university ministries there. But Grace, it was a big part for her, for example. What about yourself?
It wasn't a huge part. Like, I didn't spend, other than being on campus for classes, that was the only other thing I really did at uni was the campus Bible study stuff. And the weekly, I can't really remember, I think there was like weekly sort of big lecture style gatherings, but there was also Bible studies, smaller Bible studies. So I was in both of those things. I didn't ever get involved in the leadership of it, and I didn't go off to the big mid-year conferences and stuff like that, because I was quite, at that same time, really involved in leadership at my church. So it was like, well, I don't really have space for both of those things. So I stayed committed to the sort of local church ministry. Yeah. But
that's exactly what we kind of said too. We were like, we need to get back to lead youth group and stuff. Is that what you were doing? Youth group as well? Yes,
so I was in the youth leadership, and then probably youth leadership for all of the times I was at uni, and then moved into in the church we had a sort of government, like the leadership structure here, but it was called a diaconate, so we were all deacons, so I got involved in that pretty young as well. And I led women's ministry and small group ministry and other things across the years as well.
Have you always been passionate to be doing some form of leadership like that?
It's something that always seems to happen, and I do love it. I love it, but I always find I try to not be the leader in groups, and then just raise up to end up being the leader. It just happens. I think when you're in a group where there's not a leader and it's a bit aimless, that I find that difficult. So I'll end up
I'm a little bit like
getting
that too.
in and taking some leadership. But I also do think God's gifted me in leadership, and it's something that I love studying and teaching as well. So
how did you find, we've spoken a lot about like the lessons you learn through doing ministry, especially in early years. Did you find that God grew you in any particular ways during those early years?
I think there's some really like standout moments of like big shifts for me. That God as provider, it was a really big a big shift for me, that I don't have to be responsible for that at all. I can just be really open-handed about the decisions that I make, and just trust God. It doesn't have to be about money influencing the decisions. And so when Anthony was in ministry, and he sort of launched a ministry, and so there was very little money associated with that. So the pressure was sort of to make money, but instead of making that the driver, we just made different decisions. We lived in a granny flat in the backyard of his house, so that I could, because I was also, started to have a family. So, I didn't rush back to work. I had time off and those types of things. So, being freed to not make decisions based on economics and just trusts that God was going to provide. And there was so many examples of, we were living in a granny flat that had an asbestos roof and didn't have the money to change that. And, we didn't tell anybody, about that. But one day, just before Jake was born, a cheque just came into the letterbox for the roof on it, things like that, really specific provisions of God, which just really reinforced that, no, I don't have to be worried about this stuff. God has got that in hand. I think another thing that was really significant for me in that whole area of belonging is the passage in Genesis where God's talking to Hagar, and Hagar refers to him as the God who sees me, and I think that's a really powerful thing for me, that that whole idea of God knows intimately your situation and you're the God who sees me. I think that was really, when I sort of came across that concept, that was really powerful and significant for me back then. I think the other thing, there was a few times where I really faced some difficult stuff that happens in life, that happens in all of our lives. And the realisation, this was another big shift for me, the realisation that I couldn't actually recall a lot of scripture. What came to mind was lyrics of songs, which was really helpful because they were based on scripture, but it wasn't scripture. And so that really challenged me to, no, you actually need to have scripture. Like at those points where you've tried all of your resources and you've gone to, tried everything, and you absolutely need to rely on God. Not having scripture to recall was something that I realised that's not great. So I started that journey of reading the whole Bible a few times from cover to cover, trying to be a bit more invested in having the word be the thing that comes out of my lips, not the lyrics of songs.
Well, did you have a favourite song at that time though? One that you always went back to?
Things like one that just comes to mind, which was really old, that put on the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, like trying to turn back to God in those sort of moments. That's something that's just come to mind. Other things that were significant in that journey of like seeing The Passion of the Christ, that movie for the first time, and being so impacted by that's my sin that contributed to that outcome, seeing that and having a visual for it. It changed the way that I read the Bible,
Really?
So those sorts of moments.
I've never actually seen the movie. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
We don't do it every year because it's just too heavy to do it every year, but we started a bit of a practice of watching it with the kids at Easter.
Yeah.
And just like, this is what we're talking about. So they love that.
Good Friday treat.
Good family fun.
Come
right
on, movie night, guys.
It's that usual Good Friday movie night.
So those types of those times. And, you know, when I reflect back on those years of living in the granny flat, how peaceful and happy times they were, because we were cool. Totally relying on God's provision, as Anthony was studying and I was, you know, on maternity leave, and those moments where you're very close to God because you're really aware of His direction, His provision in the sort of day by day way. Yeah,
when everything is stripped back. That's what you've got left.
Did you find that your relationship with God changed when you started a family? Or was that something different?
I think your awareness of like what love for a child and how much the sacrifice of giving up that child, that, you know, you have more awareness of that. Yeah. I think I appreciated my parents more, you know, the stuff that they would have gone through that you're just oblivious to as a child, you know. But there was, I don't know whether it was when I was having kids or if it was before that. I was saying, you know, one of the things that was really important to me was the concept of father. And I was at a church once, a charismatic Pentecostal church once, visiting on holidays, and they did this thing where they were singing, and then they just said, sing your own song to God. You use your own words to tell God what you think. And I really struggled with it, and so I just sort of continued to sing the lyrics that were in the song. And I realised I actually have an issue with being able to express my feelings to my father. And so I really worked through that for a while. What does that mean? And like, how can I get rid of my earthly image of father so that I can see God the Father for who He is? And I think that probably was at that time because I was watching Anthony with the kids and like, how am I interpreting this father-child relationship? So, so it was a really helpful experience to go through, to go, I need to be able to express my feelings to God directly without, I mean, it's helpful to use scripture to do that and song to do that, but I also need to be able to express my own words, and that was a sort of really significant learning moment for me as well.
And would your studies in psychology would have helped you with that too?
Oh, maybe just give it more labels, but no, not necessarily. I think it's always hard to apply some of that learning to yourself.
Yeah.
You know, so.
No, it's always, I mean, people that manage to be counsellors and psychologists and psychiatrists, I'm like, I wouldn't be able to do it because I'd feel like I'd take on so many of the emotions that those people were feeling. So you have to be a special person, I think. Yeah. We have to have a special ability to do it when you're doing that.
I mean, I think it just gives you for me, it gave me frameworks to think about my thinking and my attitudes about things. And, you know, maybe when you observe other people's behaviour, you've got a framework to think about it in, so you can, not necessarily make snap judgments about it, but just think about, okay, that's being influenced by certain things. So perhaps that awareness. But I mean, I don't think people always used to say to me, oh, you know, so are you reading my mind now? Like as if they knew that you did psychology. Yes, I do a class in that.
Just like every question you're like, how do you feel about that?
No, I think
how does that make
raises
you feel?
Your awareness of how people may react to things. But
I mean, I think, I mean, sorry to keep talking about myself, but I think that, I mean, going through some counselling myself has helped me with that massively, to be able to help and be more aware and help other people too. Yeah. That was kind of why I asked the question. Back to Braden's original question though, can you tell us about your kids? You've got two
kids, yes, 2 adult kids. One is married and has 2 children of his own, so I'm actually a grandmother as well. So Jake lives in Mollymook, is a landscaper, runs his own business down there, and has 2 kids down there. And Beth is working at Baptist World Age. She's just finished a master's, and she's a delight to have still living with us, but she's keenly looking for another living arrangement.
Looking for the way out.
What was I had a question I was going to ask you. Oh, just in terms of, you also spoke about Anthony doing his ministry, and also trying to work out where is the money going to come from, and relying on God to provide that for you. What was Anthony doing? And you said he started his own ministry.
Yeah.
And were you receptive to that idea to begin with?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So he went. Again, he can tell his own story, but he left. He was working in. He was in hotel industry in IT. So funny. So he's an IT manager.
The bad boy in IT.
Oh, just he's just not IT literate, really. But he was heading that up, and then he went and worked in a specialised IT company and realised this is just such a bad mistake. And at
he
the
must
time,
be good in job interviews.
I think he was doing well in the job, but he just realised this is not what I want to be doing. Yeah. And at that time, we were both involved in a ministry at Gymea Baptist that was called Help in Living. So we used to just go out into the community and do whatever needed to be done. Do the lawns and weed a garden for someone who was not able to do it themselves, whatever, all that sort of stuff. And he was really loving that stuff, so he was like, I think I'll move into that. So he went to TAFE and did like a community services type of course, and it was just so basic and so bad. And he's like, what am I doing? I've left a job and I'm doing this. And I was pregnant as well. He'd resigned from his job, but the same day that I found out I was pregnant, like all that was great. So let's trust God for this journey. Yeah. And we just were coming back from the beach one day. I was like barefoot and pregnant, and we drove past Table College, and it was like, I think we should go in there. So we went in and the principal, of course, was there and said, come on in, let's have a chat right now. So I felt super comfortable in that discussion. But so Anthony went to Table College, did I don't know what his first degree was, but I think an undergraduate sort of degree in theology and counselling, and then did a Masters of Counselling. And the first ministry that he started was Southern Community Welfare, which is now called Hopefield, out of Gymea Baptist. So it was a counselling service out of, like, Christian counselling service out of the church. So that's what he started, and so he did that for a lot of years, and also then became the missions pastor and did both for a while. So yeah, I was totally on board with that, and yeah, they were really fun days where he was studying there and getting involved in ministry.
Was it difficult doing that? And you said you were pregnant with it was with Jake, obviously. How did you go with that?
Well, as I said, we lived in the granny flat.
Made it work.
Yeah, just made it work. So we've sort of spent 4 years on and off. We house sat a couple of times in between those 4 years, but we spent pretty much 4 years in that granny flat. So as Jake got older, we partitioned the room with those vertical blinds. It was, real effective.
Wow, okay.
No, but as I say, I look back on those days and think they were great. They were, it was fun, and there wasn't a lot of pressure because we didn't have a whole lot of overheads, and so no, it was good. And he then went into sort of more missional, like as he took over the mission pastor role, became very much passionate about doing overseas ministry. And so with little kids, I was like, well, I'm not ready to just go. Well, that was one of my biggest fears. If I just really give God the total control, that he's going to say, great, off you go.
Off you go to some other country. Yeah, right.
But so he started travelling, and so from when Beth was 2, he was doing long stints of mission stuff with African Enterprise and with other sort of mission-related stuff. So, it wasn't easy. There were times where I felt like, well, and I know that I said to him, well, every time you say yes to all these ministry opportunities, you're saying no to us, and we're just, at home doing the family thing. Yeah. But some of that's immaturity, and but we're realising that we're actually doing this together. We just have different roles. Is part of growing in maturity and learning how to do that together.
Also, just to validate, tough with 2 young kids. That would have been hard as well.
Yeah. But
I was just going to ask what happened next, really. So you're finished university.
Yep.
You've had 2 children.
Working. I was working at St George Bank while I had those 2 kids.
That's right.
And then I moved from there to I went back to the University of New South Wales, and worked in this sort of staff development training and area there. So
training is something something that you're passionate about, isn't it? I can tell with the way I mean, absolutely. Doing certificate of theology with you is that you're really passionate about that. Yeah. Why is that an important part of your life?
Well, again, I think, along with leadership, I think that's one of the giftings that I have, is being able to teach people. And so, I guess I love seeing somebody, learn something new, grow into their potential. Mentoring, coaching stuff is really meaningful for me as well, because you're seeing somebody grow and become, more and more skilled in something, or more and more aligned with God's purposes for them. That sort of So I just think that's a passion that God's given me, and which is probably what I was trying to find in psychology. That supporting, equipping, building up people. Which is the part of training that I love. Look, I love talking, imparting my wisdom. So but I much prefer the learning environments that are participative, and that not just. I did a bit of lecturing where there's really no interaction. That's not the sort of teaching that I like doing. So actually, really being hands-on with people and walking alongside them as they learn, and is the stuff that I love. So.
No, I think you're really good at it.
Yeah.
In my experience, I think you're really great at it. And again, you fulfill that role really, really well here at church, which I think sometimes goes unseen. And I just want to
thank you.
Shine a light on that, because I think it's really important. Yeah. So, working at the University of New South Wales for quite a while.
Yeah, I'm just a bit hazy on the numbers. the numbers.
That's
maybe about 8 years, perhaps.
Yeah, right.
And then I left there and started my own business. So about 25 years in my own business, running my own business.
Were you? Okay. Yeah. What would you say the thing, and we obviously talking about being a Christian, what's the difference being a Christian working for someone as University of New South Wales, like you said, and also St. George Bank before then, and then working for yourself?
Yeah. So many things that are different about that. I don't know about the it's not different being a Christian in those environments, but just working for myself, obviously I could choose the work and say no to some of the work that I didn't want to do, that didn't align with what, I felt like I wanted to be spending my time doing. But I think the challenge of being a Christian in the environment that you're in is the same everywhere. And we're actually just talking about that in the internship today, that we're not. We were talking about discipleship and mission, and it's and I said, in what ways are we fulfilling the task of mission, as we've been, sort of the mandate that we have on our lives to do, to be part of God's work in the world. And the answers were all, youth work, when we're doing youth leading, when we're at church on Sundays. And I think it's easy for us to compartmentalise, well, we're on mission when we're doing stuff that's associated with our church ministry. But I think we're on mission every day, everything that we do. So we were chatting about, what does it look like to be on mission in the workplace? What does it look like to be someone who lives as a Christian and is visible, their good works are visible? I was reflecting on that a little bit. When I left the St. George, I don't think I was particularly intentional about how I was living my life as a Christian there. But when I left, they gave me a little anchor. My manager gave me an anchor and said, the reason we're giving you this is because you're really grounded in your faith. Oh. Not a Christian lady, wow. Not a Christian team in any way. And so just recognising that. So, I think, just trying to be transparent in the way that you live, trying to make decisions that align with what God would want you to be doing. And in the workplace, you're often faced with choices to compromise that. Yeah. And so, not doing that. Sometimes you don't think that people see it, but that was a really good example to me that actually people do see it and notice that you're actually doing something differently than what we would expect the typical person in the workplace to do. At the uni, it was different. There was... same type of issues, but there was a few times where it was like, okay, well, I'm going to actually do something very different here than what's expected, because it's not aligned with the way that God would want us to act. And that's part of why I left there. I think I went to the uni because I was really hoping, in that path towards ministry, I was hoping to do something that felt more meaningful. Like working in the bank was great, but didn't feel like I was actually doing anything meaningful in the world. And so I thought, education, uni, that's going to be that. But it wasn't. It was just another big organisation. So, for me, getting into my own business allowed me to do work for Christian organisations and to be a little bit more, we were really open about the fact that we were Christians when we were working with, so we did a lot of work with colleges, vocational colleges mostly, and schools and higher ed stuff. But, we were really open about we're Christians and we do this. So it wasn't that we were doing Christian work all the time, but we were really open about that we were all Christians. And there was an interesting time in my business where we partnered with someone who wasn't a Christian. Sort of two businesses did some partnering together. And in the end, we were like, no, we need to part ways because this is an uneven yoke where it's not the best way for us to work. So we separated. So,
what was the actual business? What were you actually, the service you were providing? So
working mostly with registered training organisations, so like TAFEs, private TAFEs. Yep. Doing everything from writing curriculum, delivering programs for them, doing compliance, just making sure that they were able to comply in a regulated environment. So some of it was very boring. Compliance is not my thing, even though I actually did it for a lot of years.
Yeah, you do it better than I would. It is very boring.
Yeah. But what I guess I loved about it was the flexibility. It was the creating content and creating training, but also helping organisations. Unfortunately, the nature of our business meant that we often worked with colleges who were in trouble because otherwise they don't need you to come in and help them. So we saw the ugly sides of organisations often, and so we were able to go in and help them fix that and help to, which in some senses was quite pastoral, because you're working with people who are really struggling and they're in trouble and they're facing getting their businesses closed down. So, that
and also it fits the kind of training mentoring thing that you like doing as well.
Yeah, it was all about that. Yeah.
What inspired you to start that business? Was this like, I could just do this on my own? Okay.
Yeah, so I was working at the uni and I left with a colleague and we started the business together. It was for the education department in Canberra wanted a coaching program for their early new teachers coming out of college. So we went down to Canberra and ran a program for the education department on how to equip and support your new teachers as they come out. So we just had that one job and we were like, yep, let's go.
Let's keep doing this.
Let's go. So we started with that and then, just started to try and find work after that. So.
And 25 years you were doing that for.
Yeah, and again, this is another way that God was really faithful. The hesitation for going into business was I don't want to go and do marketing. I don't want to go and find the work. I'm not going to be good at that. If someone asks me how can I help them, more than happy to tell them about the services that we can provide. But to go out there and do the sort of cold marketing
sell
stuff,
yourself kind of thing,
didn't want to do that and never had to. God just brought work constantly for all of those years.
Wow.
That's really cool. Cold selling yourself, you've got to be a certain type of person to do that, right?
It's just not. And there was lots of stuff that I learnt about trusting God in that, because if anyone's ever run their own business or been in consulting, it's never this nice steady flow of work. It's lots of work, no work.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so trusting that there was going to be more work coming and not trying to get to, well, what do I do to create work, but just to trust God for the next bit. There was lots of opportunity to learn that over the time. Yeah.
What do you think God taught you over those 25 years? Like, he kept providing that opportunity. Was it just keep relying on me and not be self-sufficient? I mean, I feel that's theme.
That is a big part of it. But I think also just it was a time that I think I was just growing in maturity as well. There was nobody to fall back on. We had to make it work for ourselves. There was just two of us.
Yeah, if things don't get done,
you
haven't done it. You know what I mean?
But it also did give me space to actually be able to be involved in church ministry still, to be flexible with that, to start doing some study, to So I think I just grew in maturity over that time as well, and was able to balance being a mum and working. So I could just totally make the hours work around the kids, which was important. I wanted to be around in the afternoons for the kids, so it allowed me to do that. Be involved in we didn't continue to live in the granny flat, but we did sort of just build an extension on the back of Anthony's parents' house. And even though Jake had friends that had lovely waterfront properties in Gymea Bay and whatever, most of the time the kids would hang at our place. which I think is because I was there. Like some places there was no parents, and so just if we go to the Cells place, we're going to get fed.
Yeah, get some snacks.
We're going to get some snacks, but also I think that just that stability that I think I was looking for myself, was just there. Like there was always someone there, and
you're providing that stability to others.
For them. So I think that was important. So for me, staying in the business all that time, I think allowed me to be able to provide that stability. But I think just learning to trust God in it all was a big part of that.
What about being a mum? I mean, Jake and over 25 years, obviously Jake and Beth grow up.
Yes.
I know that Braden asked you that question previously, but just as you look back on it, being a mum for a number of years now, what do you think that God really taught you in that? Because I really love the things that you already said, but I feel like if we look at it as a whole during that time, what else do you think he taught you being a mum?
Like the importance of being present, and being, like I always used to say to Jake, more than Beth, because Beth didn't sort of go out really late at night ever really, but Jake would, just for them to know it doesn't really matter where you are, what you do, at any time I'm available, and just call me and I'll come, and no judgment, just I'll come. So I think that presence and that, I think just that relationship that you can have with your kids when you are engaged in their lives and open to what are you interested in, and I'm going to be part of that. Choice, like I think we gave our kids a lot of choice in what they wanted to do, just different decisions, that you make as a family. One, and again, like I think I probably drew on a leadership paradigm for that I used in my work, but I used it with the kids, and I actually taught the kids the leadership paradigm, that there are certain situations where we're going to talk about it and we'll decide together. There's some that I'm going to ask you about, but I'm going to decide. There's some that I'm not going to ask you about at all and I'm just going to decide. And there's some that I'm going to go, you know what, I don't need to be involved, you totally decide. Yeah. And so we talked about that, and I would say, well, this is one of those occasions where you can just decide. You're equipped to decide. And others would be like, nah, like I've heard what you said, but we're doing it this way. I think I wanted to instill in them that they have capacity to also contribute and try and empower them in the ways that God's created them. And I think that the only thing that I regret as I think back on parenting was Jake was really passionate about, he got really passionate about and concerned about people who were homeless because of a few things that we'd involved the kids in. And there was he would go to bed at night, and there was one night where he said, Mum, there are people asleep. They're going to sleep on the streets tonight, aren't there? It's like, yes. And can we go and do something? And I'm like, you're in bed, dude. Like, we'll do something, but not now. And I look back on that and go, maybe there would have been things that I could have actually actioned that he was really wanting to do. And I'd sort of, like, he was probably 7. Like, no, we're not going to go out on the street now. Those sorts of things I look back and go, oh, maybe I could have done that a bit differently. Yeah. But trying to expose them to stuff so that their world wasn't just little. Living in the Shire can be very little. And I think because Anthony travelled so much and brought back stories of the ways that people live in other parts of the world, we were pretty intentional about trying to help the kids in appropriate ways understand that, the world is not all like we experience. Yeah. So.
No, yes, I think that's quite an important thing to to give people perspective.
Yeah.
You're going to ask something, Brad?
Oh, just you've been at. It's kind of weird to talk about a time where you weren't at Soul Revival because you've been here for a while.
Yeah.
What attracted you, and why? Like, what attracted you to come to Soul Revival, and like what made you decide to stick around and call here home? And you're obviously on staff now and stuff. So
yeah. Well, it was really because. Beth's probably going to shoot me for talking about her, but anyway, it was sort of at a stage. I had been in leadership at Gymea Baps for a lot of years, and there was the Constitution said after 3 terms or whatever you have to step off for a term. So, I was in that stage where I wasn't actually serving as on the diaconate on the leadership team, and Beth wasn't.
That is an odd word.
Diaconate, deacon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you did say that before, sorry. But okay, sorry. Keep going.
So I wasn't serving on that. So I was just sort of attending church as a regular member.
Pleb.
Yep. And it was interesting because it was like, wow, this feels really different to not know all the things that you know when you're on the leadership teams.
Right.
Yeah.
But Beth wasn't very connected. She didn't really have a lot of friends and she was looking for something else. And so she knew Stu through Chip Lunch from Kirrawee High. So she was like, I know about this church plant that's happening, and I think I might like to check that out. So she said, would you come with us? So because it was Saturday night and church for us was Sunday, we did both. So we would go with Beth, but it was really with the intention of helping her settle in, and then we would just continue on at Gymea Baps. But I don't think I wasn't particularly seeking anything, but the experience of community that we experienced when we arrived, even just like the very first night, was pretty powerful. And it was like, okay, I didn't realise I was missing this. And I think given it was at a time when I was feeling a little bit disconnected because I wasn't part of my experience of church was different. It was probably even more impacting. But we were really impacted by things like, Ange Greaves straight up talking to us, like not just a hi, but like a good friendly conversation. Quinn, I remember also, and then after a few weeks down in Renee, like inviting us over for lunch. It's like, why would you want us to come? It was like really foreign. Like we're old. You're not our age, but but finding that really appealing and that sort of real sense of community. So then we were like, Beth, do you mind if we stay?
Right.
Yeah. So that was.
And you also had some connection with Stu, our senior pastor, right?
Anthony sort of grew up with him. We're sort of. He wasn't in my year, but Anthony grew up with him, and sort of knew. And when we were living in the granny flat, they were actually across the road at the Crawshaw house for some of that time. So. Yeah, so there was a bit of overlap there. Yeah.
So you came just as a regular church attendee.
Yeah.
Then how did you end up being on staff at the church? It seemed there's a bit of a pattern here, Karen, because you keep saying that you just keep. You're like, the situation. I find myself in that situation.
Well, I started getting involved in Berea because it was something that was really. I came along as an attendee to the Wednesday night. At the time, it was sort of regular Wednesday night tutorials. So I came along to that, really loved, sitting under the teaching of, people like Tim and Anthony Elliard and Stu, and I really enjoyed that. And so then got involved in the service team and I can't remember there was like a project sort of task that was needed, and Stu was like, would you want to just do that as a consultant for... So we sort of did that bit of work. I think it was just reviewing or writing up some bit of the program. I can't really remember what the first thing was. So that went well, and it was, and because I was in my own business and consulting, I had flexibility to be able to go, well, I can do this X number of hours or a day a week, whatever. So it started like that, and then it just grew into more days.
No, it's great. If you are listening, you can hear some noises. It's the year 5 and 6 group fuse next door, but that's letting everyone know that it's not a gigantic basketball game going on somewhere nearby.
But the experience of actually coming onto staff as a pastor, that sort of surprised me. That I was going to be called a pastor. I was like, well, I don't have theological training. I was like, really? Can't you just call me like a trainer? So yeah, that was a really, I had always wanted to do theological training, and that was a really good, prod to it's time. So
and I think you also just have such a good set of skills. I feel like the theological training that you're doing is amazing, but this training training and life experience you already have is, like, I just sit down sometimes with Beck when you are just able to do things and articulate things in ways that I could just never do. Like the way that you put things together or training things, or she'll be like, oh, look what Karen did. I'm just like, oh my gosh. Like, it's so it just shows how there isn't just one particular path for people to end up being pastors, because otherwise you're just going to end up with the same people doing the same things. And I think it's so useful to have someone who comes from that kind of school of thought that you've been through, and it just shows in the awesome things you're able to do.
Yeah, and I often reflect on that as the path that, so often there'll be a piece of work or something that, like now here or in some of my previous roles, where I go, actually I've done that before and can I don't have to start from scratch. I've got that thing and I've got that thing. And so as I think about how God's equipped me for ministry, all of those pieces are now being used. They were parts of that journey of preparing me for ministry.
He's not just provided for you financially along the way. He's provided with you with experience and things that are now helping you and bless our church through. It's so crazy when you look back at the way things work out sometimes. It's like he has a plan or something.
It's not random.
Even though you feel like it's random at the time, but it's
or you feel like you're making your own choices. It's like but God's well, and maybe sometimes we are, but God can still use them.
Exactly.
Karen, if I may, can I ask you the final question that we like to ask on the podcast? When you look back over all this time that we've kind of reviewed, as a training word, audited.
There is an assessment coming.
Excellent. For all the listeners, we'll send a multiple choice.
Click on the link below in the show notes.
That's right. What? How old am I? Looking back over all of that time, what would you wish that you told your younger Christian self that you know now?
I think what we were just sort of reflecting on then, that I think I thought for a lot of years, my path's not ministry. And I'm supporting Anthony in ministry. It's not, and I mean, in saying that, I was really involved in leadership at church, but as not professionally, and so maybe there's a couple of things that God's got a plan and he's actually implementing it even when we don't know. So if I could tell myself when I had that realization of, Anthony's going into ministry, I'm not, because I did actually get offered a job as a small groups leader, pastor from a church in Melbourne, but it was at that stage where Anthony and I weren't married, and it was like, if I go, that's going to end that, what's going to happen, and so I didn't go. But if I could tell myself back then, that's going to happen, God's got a plan and he will get you there, that would maybe have changed the way that I viewed work along the way, and actually appreciated the experiences as stuff that was going to be able to be used. So I think that's probably one of the things, and there was something else but it's gone out of my head now.
Oh, that's all right. Well, I think it's a good place to end on the podcast. As we say, we like to wrap up the chips. But I've really valued having you on the podcast, Karen. Thank you very much. I'm sure as Braden is. And as Braden said, you're a big blessing to our church. And I was just thinking about a number of times you talked about self-sufficiency and learning that we need to rely on God. But also recalling that story when you're at St. George Bank and they gave you the anchor and they said you're really grounded in your faith. And I think that all of the things that we've talked about in your life have been examples of being grounded in your faith, whether it was when you were becoming just a newly married couple and Andrew's Anthony, not Andrew, jeez, Anthony is starting out ministry, and you're like, where's the money going to come from? And same with when you're having kids, and then same when all these times that you continue to rely on God not being self-sufficient because you were grounded in your faith. And I think that's a massive encouragement to me and hopefully for everyone listening. So, and watching, if you're watching on YouTube. But thank you. Any final words, Braden?
No final words of wisdom or prophecy.
Okay. Let's wrap up the chips. Thank you so much, Karen. And we always like to finish with a one way if you wish to join us in that.
Yep.
All right, one way.